How you doing? How's it going? Today we're going to talk about an old friend of mine who's passed, Jason Crum. Jason's a painter. He's in a permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art. He was an art teacher and all-around great dude and great American. I met him because he was the manager here. He became the manager here as I was living here, and as I do, whenever the buildings here get a new manager, I'd make sure I become pals with them. I'm helpful to them because I was the handy guy here for a couple years when I first moved in, so I know a lot about the buildings. And I'm also now the oldest living resident. I don't know if I'm the oldest person in all these buildings, but I've lived here the longest. I've been in this apartment in particular for over 30 years now. Jason became manager back in the 90s, and he passed in 2004. Jason had a pretty impactful influence on my life in a lot of ways, from art to getting to know myself better and see myself as an artist as well. And just a really cool dude to hang out with, for me. He got here, we became pals, and I got to know about his life. So I'll tell you what I recall from what he told me. I know he was from Peoria, Illinois, and he was, as a young man, he ended up training to be a sign painter. And then he went into the Air Force, and he served in Korean War, and went to Korea. He told me a few stories. I remember there was one time when, it was so cold there, and the guys would walk out behind a tent and take a leak. The thing is like everybody took a leak in the same spot and it would pretty much instantly freeze, so they created this sheet of ice back there and they were backed up against this like a ravine kind of situation. And one of the fellas went back there one night to take a leak, and he slipped on the ice sheet caused by all the urine from all the soldiers, fell down the ravine, cracked his head open. I think the guy died, if I have that correct. Crazy. When he got back from Korea, he went to art school, and he went to Chenard. I don't know if this, I think it exists again now, but back then it was in downtown Los Angeles. He graduated #1 in his class. His contemporaries, and this is the 1950s still, right? Mid to late 50s, I guess. 58, I'm guessing, somewhere around that range is when he was there. And a lot of the people he went to school with, who, I'm not an art aficionado, I'll probably drop a few names that I can recall. One of them is on the top of it'll probably come to me. I should have prepared better for this video. But all his contemporaries are well-known, pretty famous guys. As a matter of fact, LACMA has a 20th century floor, and Jason and I went there a couple times. And Jason Johns, I think, is one of them. Obviously, Pollock, de Kooning, guys like that. These were dudes that Jason hung out with later in New York City, and I'll get to that. But I remember going down to LACMA with him, and we're walking around, and he was in the studios of these artists when the pieces that are at LACMA were being created. So he's giving me the scoop on it, all about it. And I'm making a big deal out of this, if it seems like it. I kind of am, because there's tours going around LACMA, and they got these people that work for the museums, and they're walking around, pontificating on what the artist meant and what they're trying to show you with this piece of art and blah, blah, blah. And so Jason, knowing these dudes, having been there in the studio when the pieces were made, he's listening, and he's talking to me, he's going, "That's all bullshit." That's total nonsense. A lot of what they were saying. There's one piece in particular. It's pretty well known. I don't know what it's called. It's like part of a car. It's an installation piece. It's a big thing. And the people are chicken wire with some clothes on, and it's like a 30s era automobile, and the doors open, and they're clearly like, making love. And he told me that there's a secret compartment inside the car where the artist, he put something. I don't remember what Jason told me it was, but I thought that was kind of neat. So Jason was a fun guy to pal around with, especially at art galleries, And we would sit around a lot and, we'd smoke a little grass, we'd drink a lot of wine, and we would talk about our lives with, one another. He saw me as a man, I saw him as a man, and it was fun. And I remember I was already building furniture at this time, and I was at his apartment one night. He would paint, he had this whole wall, he'd put a canvas up on the wall, and he would do his thing. And I remember just going off one day about how impressed I was with his life, like, which, by the way, wasn't terrific. We'll get into this. And I'll explain that descriptive word in a moment. But it was interesting to me because I'm looking at what he's doing and I'm like, wow, man, this is so cool. You're just an artist. Like, you get to survive being an artist. People are commissioning you to make them a piece of art. And here you are, you're doing this and you're making it happen and blah, 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 blah. And Jason says to me, he says, well, you're an artist. He says, the only difference between what you do and what I do is you work with wood. I've seen your work. You are truly an artist. You're not doing things other people do. You're building it out of your mind. So that's exactly what I'm doing. Just my medium's paint. And until Jason said that to me, I wouldn't accept that as a label for myself. I thought it sounded pretentious. I don't want to walk around calling myself an artist. A big part of that was because living in LA at that point, I met a lot of people who you would meet them and they'd tell you what they are, and then you would see what they're doing, and it was not impressive. Just saying. So I didn't want to be you know the word I'm trying to use? What the hell is wrong with my mind and my mouth today? My brain and my mouth are not syncing. There'll be some clips here, so later it might not sync either on screen. Anyhow, it was fun. He was a good dude to hang out with. He had this system. He can make this really cool art table from one sheet of plywood. He had done it many times, and I watched him do that. I thought, well, that was impressive. Jason was an impressive guy. He didn't need anything from me, really. Really, really enjoyed him. And later, after we got to be pals, he wanted me to meet his son. I think I met his son when he was 15. I know when he was 16, I taught him how to drive, and now that guy and I we're pretty tight. One of my favorite people on the planet, is a good friend, and he's now retired out of the military. We'd call him a certified badass. I won't get into that right now. You're going to see some pictures in here later, I'll insert, from some camping trips we did back in the 90s. Jason was doing a painting out in, where were we out there? The high desert out there, by 29 Palms, Joshua Tree. And that was a fun time too. Jason forgot his sleeping bag. He slept in his station wagon in a one-piece insulated thing. It was crazy. But yeah, so we hung out a lot, and it was fun, and I got to know about his life. So he graduated #1 from Chenard, and then he went to New York City, and he had some one-man shows, and he hung out at McSorley's, again, with de Kooning and Pollock and all these people, Miles Davis, and he had fun stories about all these people we know, man, famous people from the mid to late 20th century, the 50s, late 50s, 60s, 70s. Although he did work as an artist, and he did have this project he did in New York City where he painted. He's an abstract artist. That was his shtick, and he was an abstract artist, and he would do these commissioned paintings, abstract art on the sides of buildings, like gigantic things, man. Really impressive stuff. Look him up, Jason Crum. You'll see his art, painter, artist. You'll see his work there. And so he did that. But while he was in the city, the main job that he did was he sold motorcycles. And he was riding a BSA at that time. So over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, however long he was in the city, I don't recall at the moment. But he rode a motorcycle 365, 365 days a year in New York City. And that's impressive. So he had a lot of stories about that, and it was a good time. Jason's the guy that got me back on a motorcycle. And it was funny, I hadn't been on a motorcycle since high school, early 20s sometime maybe. I think I was in the Corps. And then So I decided to take the motorcycle safety course just to refresh my mind. And then I remember I bought a new Triumph and I was riding it around, and Jason's like, let's go up in the canyons. And he took me up there, and first time I rode with him through the canyons, I was trying to keep up with him, and I tapped my front brake going into a turn and just went down. He had to come back and find me, sheared the gear shift knob off, and we wired it back on sideways with some chicken wire and got home. You know, Jason was a man's man kind of dude. He's a good dude, man. And yeah, 2004, he kicked the bucket. So that was a bummer. But I happen to have 3 of his nice paintings here. I also have this. He did this for me one year. This was my old 67 Dodge pickup. I hope there's not a glare on this for the screen. Maybe I'll show it to you tighter in a moment. Did a great job on that. He actually gave me this pocket knife at one time. I remember I was just in his apartment, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And he's like, oh, you like that? Why don't you take it? Good dude. So what's interesting is after he died in 2004, so I don't know, a couple years later, I decided to look up his work, and there wasn't much going on about his work. I didn't see anything for sale or anything like that, and it's not like I was trying to sell the paintings I have of his. I like them. I have no intention of that. But I stumbled upon a story online where somebody had his paintings, and this guy happened to be Vladimir Kagan, who's a furniture designer. And I sent him a note, and he got back to me. And Vladimir Kagan and I had this really cool correspondence, and he gave me a lot of compliments. He goes, wow, you're a great writer, and thank you so much for filling me in, because he always wondered what happened to Jason. You see, Vladimir and I had a similar thing. It is interesting because my furniture has a similar vibe to Vladimir Kagan's furniture, and I wasn't even aware of it. That's a little bizarre to me. Obviously, I had seen some of his work at some point, but I honestly never had studied it. So I thought it was odd that my work ended up having a similar vibe to his. But the story with Vladimir was he knew Jason in New York City. And when you're an artist like that, you're a starving artist, man. I mean, you're depending on selling paintings to feed your family. Jason was married. I know his ex-wife. I'm not going to get into that. So what happened was that didn't go well with them in New York, and then they split. And Jason went to Arizona. Then later he lived in Colorado, and he was like this recluse painter. And he went from painting. I know I'm all over the place. I apologize, but he went from painting, just doing abstracts, to doing, what do you call it? I can't think of the term right now, but it's right there in front of you. Not still life, but he's doing painting nature and what's out there in front of you. And the interesting thing about his paintings, we'll get into it when I show them to you, is he used a heavy impasto. And when you're tight up on his work, you can clearly see the abstract nature of it. And then you pull back and you see what the image is. And then you pull back further and it becomes more realistic. And the further away you get, the more photorealistic the image becomes. And I've never seen artwork like that before. I've never seen a painter accomplish that. Other than these weird things you see where people will take pictures of people. When you walk up, you see all these pictures of people. Then you come back and you see what it is. And then you get back further and it looks like a photograph. That's what Jason did with a paintbrush. And I think that that's impressive. And I was always impressed. Also, light. I never thought about light the way Jason would put it into a painting. You don't think about shadows that often. He was doing a painting out front here one day, and I was looking at what he's doing on the canvas, and I couldn't understand that he's painting the road, but there were these stripes in it. And then I realized, I looked and went, oh yeah, he's actually capturing the light coming down between the buildings, which you're hearing me say that and you're going, duh. Some people wouldn't pick up on that. Like obviously a novice painter may not actually notice the shadow too much. They might just paint the road and the houses and not add shadow at all. That's where you get into like folk art does that a lot. You'll see a lot of folk art and you won't see the detail of shadow added very often. You start adding shadow and start playing with light and shades of color to create the shadow is what's going to give you some depth and some three-dimensionality to it and realism. So I was always fascinated by his use of that. And also, again, I'm right there. I'm looking at the painting as close to it as he is. So to me, things look blocky and like bam, 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 bam. And I was like, that's odd. But then when the painting's done and I'm, 10 feet away from it or more, it's like, wow, that looks like a photograph. To me, that blows my mind. It's like, wow, that's cool. And I don't know. I don't know how you achieve that. I think, I'm just very impressed by it. So anyhow, as I was saying with Kagan would go to his studio, walk around, and if he saw something he liked enough, he'd give Jason money for it because he knew he needed the money. Same thing with me. Back in the 90s and into the early 2000s, I was working. That was the time I was in the film industry, and I was making decent money. And so from time to time, I knew Jason was hard up for cash. He was working here as the manager. He was getting free rent. He was doing a little bit of teaching, but he wasn't pulling in a lot of coin. So I'd give him like, good money. I mean, $400, $700 in that range, whatever, maybe a little more for these paintings. And he was happy to do that with me. And back then, by the way, if you spent $700 on a painting, that's like spending $7,000 now, right? We won't get into that. So I ended up with these paintings. And then the other day, I was talking to his son, and I had mentioned in a video also a few days ago that I should do a video on him, and it's been in my mind. So here I am finally doing it. And I looked up his work, and it turns out he did sell a painting earlier this year. Well, he didn't. Whoever had it did. Some gallery sold it. And it realized almost $4,000. And the painting was, obviously it's a nice painting. I like it. But I don't think it's anything like what I have. So I am kind of considering it, because I do need to raise at least $8,000 probably to do the project I want to do on the van. So who knows? Maybe I can get that for one of these paintings. I don't know. But this is just a thing. We were really good pals, really good friends. And we shared a lot about our lives. And we had a lot of good times. We had a lot of good laughs. And we went on little trips together. And we rode motorcycles together. We went out into the canyons and we ate food and drank and got a little lit, And that camping trip with he and I and his son out there to Joshua Tree was a blast. You're going to see some pictures from that. The opening shot for this video was the first shot. I was shooting film, 35 millimeter film, and it was the very first shot in it. You see it, obviously. So part of him is cut off and it's just white. That's because that's the very first frame exposure of that roll of film. And how cool is that? It's like this happy accident, right? So I've got a lot more pictures of him and that trip, and a lot of them are in color. There's somewhere, I think I've got a photo album here. I probably should have thought to look that up or look for it, but it'll probably take me an hour to find it and knock all the dust off of it. There's actually dust on all these paintings too. It's slightly embarrassing. I notice them every day, but I don't really study them like I used to. But we're going to go ahead. I'm going to show you these paintings and keep talking. So let's just get to that, huh? All right, so I believe this painting here was Colorado, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure his son is going to see this and correct me if I'm wrong. Let's see if I can show you guys the paintiness of this, the quality of this, where he was light and where he was heavy with the impasto. I mean, you can see these brush marks. It's very abstract here, right? If you were just looking at this, you can appreciate this right here. You understand what I'm saying? Again, it is signed. This is, I think that says 96, but that doesn't make sense to me. I think he was here in 96. I might be reading that wrong. But I'll try to get you an idea of what that's like. And then, you see what this is. I mean, you really have to see this in person, I think, to appreciate it fully. But it's a beautiful thing. And I just dug it because it was this old hot rod car sitting there. So that's the first one. Now this one here, That's City Hall in the background there, right? That's the ziggurat steep stepped pyramid on the roof there. This billboard is for the movie Armageddon, which dates this to 1998. I believe this is 3rd Street heading down towards downtown. I love this painting because I know this spot exactly, and I still drive by it regularly. It's a tough one to show you, of course, in this video, the way I'm doing it. It's not an art gallery here. I don't have the greatest light. It's not on a beautiful, perfect, white background wall. And Jason had this station wagon. He'd put his easel in there and all his paint equipment and just set up and do it. He's the real deal, man. And no problems just setting up his setup anywhere and just painting. Really doing it. And again, it's that abstract, heavy impasto thing when you're up tight to it, and then as you pull away, it just looks better. It's pretty cool. I was real happy to be able to get this one from him. As I recall, he didn't actually really want to sell me this one. It was one of his favorites as well. And this one here is real special. This is real special. Because, we both loved riding motorcycles. And so he did a lot of paintings like this. He had quite a few paintings that were interesting because he put motorcyclists riding in the paintings. I remember giving him that criticism of, I don't know if you should be putting those in there. And he just kind of looked at me like, shut up. It's my work. I'm going to do what I want. But I believe this is a section of Mulholland. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, it looks very familiar to me because I was carving up these canyons as well. You can see the shadow here with the signs. Jason taught me the proper way to stretch canvas and make stretcher bars, and I made some stretcher bars for him for some of his paintings. And I mean, I still have the rabbit glue and everything else to do all this the old school traditional way. I even think I have my original notes that I took. This actually has some, is that what's going on there? I can't tell if that's paint or if that's the gesso behind the paint. But, Jason taught me, just like he would teach anybody else in an art class, how to properly make stretcher bars, put the rabbit glue on the canvas to get it taut, get the gesso on there. Where's his signature on this one? This one may not be signed. It's got to be, right? That's interesting. This is a Crum, though. There's no doubt about it. Great painting, man. This is like, I don't know, man. This is a very good one, and mainly, again, as I was saying, because we were both carving up these canyons on the motorcycles. A lot of fun. Quick flip. I'm going to sign off here and just say thanks for being here and watching. Unscripted, off the cuff, off the top of my head here. I don't really ever know how I'm going to put things out. But I miss Jason. He was a good dude. And what you're about to see here is just some snapshots of Jason and I. Well, there's mostly him and maybe some with his son. I think there's one with all three of us in there. Color and black and white. You may or may not know from watching my old videos, I've been a photographer my whole life as well and studied it in college and used to make a few bucks with that. But these are just, simple snapshots. So, again, I hope you enjoy this. I wanted to put it out for a long time. I think Jason needed something. He needed somebody to talk about him because I know that his contemporaries, if any of them are still kicking, they might appreciate it. There's probably some of you, many of whom are probably in Manhattan, or maybe you got them from your family, but his paintings are out there. The man was prolific. I mean, it's not like he ever stopped painting. He painted all the time. So there's a lot of his work out there. And I think he should be recognized. And you can get more information about Jason by looking him up. I think there's something on Wikipedia. There's definitely small biographies of him on some of these art channels, and there's probably something else out there for all I know. I really don't know. I haven't gone that deep into it because I didn't need to, because I knew the man. Thanks for being here. Have a great day. Be kind to one another. You know, when I met Jason, I didn't know the impact he would have on me. And the reason I say that, the way I'm saying it is, you're going to be meeting people throughout your life, and you don't know the impact they're going to have on you. So go into it all with an open mind. Be cool. Be cool to one another. And understand, you learn so much just from hanging out and having conversations with people. Keep life interesting, man. I'll catch you guys in the next one.